So we'll see this, common antecedent events, right? So these, and what I did was separated them. These are common antecedents that we see to escape behaviors, and these are common antecedents that we see to attention and tangible with the behaviors with the tangible and attention function. I'll let you guys read through that and see if that makes sense to you all. Make sense? Can you see the distinction in how it's categorized by its function? And what you can, like, so again, when you're assessing problem behaviors in real time, right, start looking at what the antecedent is. And if it's a student that you work with frequently, you can even start creating that list. If you're guessing or hypothesizing that it might be escape, the problem behavior has an escape function, like what I try to do too with my staff, start tallying so we can see which condition in which it happens the most, right? Which antecedent condition brings on that problem behavior the most. Now, if you're looking at behaviors that hypothetically or probably have an attention or tangible function, create this list, and the same thing. Every time he gives you a problem behavior under one of those conditions, start taking a little tally mark. That's your own way, and again, nothing fancy, but you can start doing an antecedent analysis to see which one is bringing about the problem behavior the most frequently. Because when you start to target, so let's say, for example, if I'm looking at working with an individual and I'm hypothesizing that, okay, I think it's the denials of request that he's having a very difficult time with, right? Just being told no. That's just simple, right? You know what? I'm going to create this list for me here, but I'm just going to start doing tally marks where I see that problem behavior occur the most. And let's just say with the denials of request, I have like 8 in there, right? What does that communicate to me? A significant skill deficit for this individual, right? Because I'm not going to be caught up in what he's doing to me. I'm caught up in why he's doing it. And is it his fault that he has that skill deficit? And one of the things that I look at in the school setting, or even with my own colleagues, many of them my very good friends that are also BCBAs, I tell them too, because they always tell me, Wendy, you're crazy. I don't know how you work with the big ones. And I'm like, I love it. But one of the big reasons I do it too, nobody will do it. They're all afraid to. And I get it. It is kind of scary to walk into someone who's like, probably the biggest guy I ever had was probably about 6'1" and 370. Look at me, right? Principles of behavior though. It's not about size. So what I tell them, because they all love, even the BCBA, my very good friends, they all love working with the littles. But I tell them too, whether you're in the school setting, in the PPCD classes, or you're a BCBA in the private setting, if I'm getting an 18-year-old that still has a skill deficit for not accepting no, I'm going to hold you all responsible. Because that should have been taught in those very early years. And how do you do that? Accepting no trials. Practice, practice, practice. Lots of excitement when they do learn and they show you that correct response, right? Using extinction when they don't, and then you try again until they learn how to accept no. I did it with my own little one. Her, even when she was like 2, she had a hard time with the turn taking. Healthy, she's a neurotypical, but that was real, like, she'd hold on to that. I'm like, oh, we're gonna, and even in my head, I was like, sorry, buddy. You got a behavior analyst for a mama. You need to learn how to relinquish those highly preferred items, right? That's an expected skill that all people should have, whether you're part of the special needs population or the general population. We all need to have, and that's why it's called tolerance skill training, because it is hard, and it's not pleasant, but we have to engage in those expected responses, right? So you can do a quick analysis just like that. Again, sheet of paper, a pencil, write those conditions that happen, and just do tally marks and see, because that's going to be your cue on how to identify what that skill deficit is and what you need to start teaching to, right? Because that's the replacement behavior you're going to work on for that individual while you're working towards reducing the problem behavior. Make sense? Sound pretty easy? I try to keep this practical, that you can do this anywhere. You can fold up that sheet of paper and keep it in your back pocket with the pencil, because you need a mark, right? Because you're going to be in across settings, right? So this is how you can keep track of that. You can do a quick antecedent analysis, is what we call it. What are those conditions that bring on that problem behavior? So then we work towards we move towards now the interventions, right? So these are the interventions that we would target if we're working with problem behaviors that have an escape function. These are the interventions that we're going to work towards problem behaviors that have an attention function or a tangible function. And again, so, you know, and I'm in the school setting now, so I'm hopefully bringing everybody on board slowly, but I very rarely see interventions that are tied in specifically to tangible function. And what blows me away is I'll see the identification, right? They're very good at identifying the conditions that bring on that problem behavior, right? Like, you know, being told no, transitions, all the typical stuff. But then I'm like, okay, so let's get to, hopefully, the interventions are tying into that, right? The function of that. And very rarely do I see the specificity in the FBAs or the behavior intervention plans for the student that tie in. So again, just like you all would never go to a doctor and let him throw all these medications at you without identifying specifically what your physical ailment is and matching the medication that ties into that physical ailment. We don't do that either. You know, one person even suggested to me, because I was overwhelmed when I first got there. I was thrown with, like, I think needing to do about 6 or 7 FBAs, functional behavior assessments on students. And for us, because we're so nitty-gritty, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is almost unheard of. But the school setting, I guess, is very different. And, you know, but then again, when I'd see how other the school setting traditional FBAs were done, and I'm like, well, that's why those can be whipped out in 15 minutes. But I'm like, and how is he improving with his behavior? Where's the follow-up with that? Where are we seeing those decreases in those problem behaviors? I'm like, nope, I'll just kill myself, but I'll get them done. But I'm not taking that approach. And besides, I can't because of the code of ethics that I'm bound to as a behavior analyst. But I'm like, no. When I get down to this kid, it's going to be very narrow and specific to the function of his problem behavior, and those interventions are going to match to target that function. And again, you guys, this helps you, right? If you're able to take a guess and you're like, it looks like an attention function, or it looks like an escape function, or it looks like a tangible function, that's what guides you to your intervention. But don't go there until you have enough substantial evidence to move towards that intervention, because otherwise you could be applying an intervention that does not correspond to the function of his or her problem behavior. Does that make sense? That's why I'm saying do a simple tally mark on those antecedents so that it can provide you more certainty before you move towards the interventions, right? Because we're not going to apply, if an individual is engaging in escape behaviors, I'm not going to apply interventions that are specific to attention or a tangible function. Does that make sense? Or vice versa. So this is just some of the antecedent strategies that a teacher can employ in their environment. I know sometimes that they're overwhelmed, and I think a lot of that comes from their education and their training does not provide them a substantial enough skill set for working with problem behaviors, let alone in a group setting, right? Like, how can I know that those behavior principles are out there, but I don't know how to do it in a group setting, or I don't think it can happen in a group setting, right? And then I'm like, oh, yep, it can. I'll get in there and I'll show you how we can do it. But so I think that sometimes they need those extra supports and that guidance of like how you can be specific with how you can apply that in a group setting. So I just went ahead and included this. I guess it could work like in a shelter background. How many children are you guys working with at one time? 20? That's a pretty big group. All together, or do you guys have them split up in a group?
It's like a home, in-home setting.
So they're all in one setting in the shelter?
Girl side, boy side. It's like a big home.
Common areas and dining area.
So I used to work at it. That's where I first started when I got started in the child welfare. So it was an emergency shelter too. So when you're working with them, do you split them in groups at all? Like,
In ratio.
okay, so what's the ratio?
Ratio is 1 staff member to 8 children.
Okay, I think ours was roughly like that, 1 to 10, I think. Okay, so then it is still pretty comparable almost to like a school setting or more like a day hab or group home. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this is something too that you all could apply in that group setting because you guys have about 10 in there, some of those strategies. And here's some more. Yeah, oh, even just seeing that, using effective instructions and commands. One of the things that I'll see too, and especially as a student is engaging in crisis behaviors, they'll ask, are you ready to work with me now? And I'm like, ooh, not the best way to approach that, right? That's when, and then even too, sometimes I'll hear the vague instructions of like, can you just please settle down? And I'm like, what does that mean? That's too vague. I'm gonna be more specific, right? And like, here, you can sit on this chair or you can sit on this floor. And I'm not asking questions either, right? Because I'm not gonna give you an option and present that the option for you to say no is there. Now, I'm not gonna be mean about it, but I need to start seeing I need to regain some instructional control. If I present it as a question, that would be like, I mean, how successful would you all be asking a 15-year-old teenager, are you ready to wash dishes now? Yeah, that's almost like you're including the option for them to say no, right, when it's not. So that's one of the things that, you know, when you're working with these individuals, make sure that your instructions are set up that, I mean, they're still, you know, supportive, but they're still effective for you to regain instructional control with that person, or even maintaining it, right? So like if I'm gonna transition with a group of young elementary school students and we're gonna move from one location to another, I'm also gonna say, I'm not gonna say, hey, we're gonna do a great job of going to the classroom to the gym. What does that mean, right? I'm gonna be very specific with them. I want everybody to show me that we can stand 1 arm's length apart from each other. And when we're walking in the hallway, we're all gonna walk quietly with our hands at our side or behind our back. Can everybody show me that right now? And if they show me that, model that, I'm gonna praise a couple of those individuals. Nice job of showing me, oh, I love that your hands are behind your back. I love that so-and-so and so-and-so are only an arm's length away from each other. You guys look ready. You're all facing forward. I want you all also 1 arm's length behind me, right, in a straight line. We're gonna walk to the right side of the hallway. And again, when I say that we give those kinds of instructions, we want to set them up for success, right? We're going to be very explicit with what it is, because these children are still learning. And a lot of times too, even if they're older, it's because no one has explicitly taught them. So we have to explicitly teach them. And again, that's where you go into being like that sports analyst, right? You have to be very specific to what it is that you're wanting from them. They don't know. And if they don't understand, then you need to take it a step further, right? To either physically prompt or guide them to what that response looks like, or you modeling it for them, or maybe showing them a visual symbol of what that looks like, or even video modeling, right? There's multiple components that you can use to teach. And that's why I say too, it's not just this, right? Because those are all interventions, and those all fall into like antecedent interventions too, right? You're prepping them, you're priming them. We want them to be successful, so guess what? I'm gonna provide you all those supports that you need up front so that you can be successful. One of the big things too that I'll see, that downtime, especially for those teachers that are not prepared with their lesson plan for the day or their materials, and they're still scrounging around, the kids are sitting there, not good. That can also bring on problem behaviors. Other thing too, now this I have seen too in our setting, we had to, and that's an antecedent intervention, but when you see the presentation of that new material that they're teaching to, and it's all new, right? So it's unknown, they don't have the skill yet that the teacher is working towards that student acquiring with that with the material that they're presenting. But I'm like, whoa, they're gonna contact for us like the way we would say, that's a lot of punishment that he's going to contact, right? You're presenting all this new material, and I understand, in a school setting, all of that needs to be presented, but he's contacting every question that you're asking, right? All this content is new to him. It's unfamiliar. He's just now in the learning acquisition, right? The skill acquisition for that content. You did not include stuff that he's already mastered so that he can still contact reinforcement, right? So that he can still feel that he's being successful. You've removed all the content that he has mastered, you should still intersperse some of that content that he's mastered in there so that he's contacting that success, right? So he's not contacting failure so much in the presence of new material. Teachers, I think, need to get better at that when we're working with them. And then again, that's a pretty significant, providing that opportunity for choice as much as you can, even in crisis, when you're working with crisis behaviors. And that's really hard. I know for teachers, they sometimes take a very traditional approach to punishing. And it's like, whoa, first off, there's very little research that shows the long-term effectiveness of using a punishment approach for working with individuals that engage in problem behaviors. So very short-term effect. We want this individual, and again, too, we want to maintain a therapeutic rapport with this person that we're working with. We want them to feel supported when we're working with them, even with their problem behaviors. So give them, when you're able to, give them choice. Like even if, no matter if they've just pulled my hair, scratched at me, made an attempt to bite at me, but again, if I'm working towards regaining instructional control, you'll still see I'm maintaining a neutral tone of voice. I'll still give those choices, right, because I want him to sit down, but I'll say, hey, would you like to sit in this chair? Or not would you, but you can either sit in this chair or you can sit on the floor, right? And if they tell me, well, I just want to stand, okay, you can either stand in this corner or you can stand at the back of the room, right? So because I need to see, I'm going to slowly regain that instructional control with that individual, but again, trying as much as I'm able to give them choice. And if you can, you know, incorporate student interests, preferred activities. Schedules are really nice. And that's just not just to children. I know I can't function with that one. I'm very routine based. So here we go. We get into reinforcement for skill acquisition, how you use that when you're teaching those alternative skills, and then also how are you using reinforcement for the behavior reduction of the problem behavior, right? Oh yeah, this is what, there's a huge, I get a lot of, I guess, feedback a lot of times is that there's this, they think, especially in the school setting, that reinforcement is synonymous with tokens. And I'm like, no, not at all. And I'm like, it is very effective if you're using it accurately with how to reduce problem behavior and build up the skills with someone who is learning the alternative replacement behavior for that problem behavior. You're using reinforcement in both of those situations, and if you're using it right, it'll show in the responses, right? You'll see the decrease in the problem behavior, and you'll see an increase in that alternative behavior that you're teaching to. But again, that's a skill too. I mean, we all, like, if you're not in the field of, like, you know, and of course I would never expect like staff to have the skill set that I have, but teaching them, I'm like, you're learning too, right? You're gonna learn how you respond with reinforcement to problem behavior, but you're also gonna learn how you're going to be responding when you're teaching the new skills.